Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Tuesday night edition of USA Hockey's Officiating Zoomcasts. I would like to welcome all of you on board this evening for our topic fresh off of the World Juniors. Our topic this Tuesday night is IIHF Officiating, or International Ice Hockey Officiating. My name is Scott Zelkin. I am your host and moderator this evening. I am the manager of the Junior Officiating Development Program for USA Hockey, and joining me on our panel tonight are two of USA Hockey's finest international ice hockey officials. The pride of Buffalo, New York, Dina Allen. Dina has a long and illustrious not only USA Hockey and collegiate officiating hockey career, but also a long international ice hockey officiating career. She has officiated 11 international tournaments since 2011. And if those tournaments weren't held in the US of A, we could assume that all of the tournaments she was going to began in the country with the letter S. She's been to Slovenia, Slovakia, Switzerland, South Korea, and then we'll count Vermont and Plymouth, Michigan amongst some of the other places she's been. If you didn't catch, I slid South Korea in there, and yes, Dina was one of our representatives from USA Hockey to be chosen to referee in the 2018 Winter Olympics in the women's ice hockey tournament. We're glad to have Dina here and give us a perspective on international ice hockey officiating from the women's side of things. So Dina, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. And not only are we proud of Dina, we're also proud of our next guest, Wyandotte, Michigan, Jake Davis is a proud, I'm not even going to call him an alum, even though he pretty much is an alum of the Officiating Development Program, working in the USHL as well as now the ECHL and the American League. Jake has been involved internationally since 2014. He's worked 5 different international IIHF championships around the world, including the World Juniors and the World Men's Ice Hockey Championship, or is just called the World Championships, at least on the men's side. Jake, thanks for joining us. Look forward to talking and hearing about some of your experiences on the international scene.
Thanks, Scott, for having me. I'm happy to be here. Excited.
Yes, no, it's great. And as we plan out these different topics on our Tuesday nights, as we were thinking back in October and November and planning them, we figured, well, this is the first Tuesday after the World Juniors. And so would be a good opportunity for us to talk about international officiating. And with that, none of us had our crystal ball out and knew that we would be 1 week removed from a U.S. gold medal, their 5th gold medal ever at the World Juniors. And so it was an exciting event. It was exciting in the fact that it was really the only hockey going on the big stage at the time. And hopefully all of you that are joining us tonight had an opportunity to watch that. And as you were watching it, hopefully you were thinking, boy, I'd love to do that. Or how cool would it be to be able to work one of those events? And hence our topic tonight. And as we do on all of our various Zoomcasts, regardless of the topics, we like to start with a poll question to get a sense of where our audience is and what our audience is thinking about in terms of our various topics. And tonight is no different. So I'm going to throw up a poll. We'd love to hear or get to see what you think about some of this. So we're going to take a couple of minutes here and let you kind of let us know where your heads are at or what your experience is internationally. So with the questions, within the last 2 years, did you watch an IIHF championship on TV or in person? Yes or no? And then if yes, which championship did you watch? And we've got everything from the men's under 18 to the women's under 18, all the way through the women's world championships and the men's world championships. And then true or false, I'm interested in working an international tournament or international competition. And then do you know how to get involved in working one of those international tournaments? So we're getting pretty good response here as the votes come rolling in. We'll give it about another 15 seconds and then we'll move on. Okay, so let's share these results. And as we can see with all of our audience, all of our TV broadcast partners and their sponsors are going to be very happy to know that almost 90% of our audience today was watching the IIHF tournaments on TV or in person. And then with those, what were you guys watching? So if 90% of you were watching, you know what? We've got a pretty good wide variety here. We've got certainly the majority of you were watching the World Juniors, and whether you were watching from Edmonton this year or the Czech Republic last year, a lot of you were watching those, but then also the World Championships, both on the men's and women's side. And you know, we've got a pretty good representation here. The majority of you, once again, are interested in working international tournaments. So you've come to the right place to learn all about that. And then finally, and this is good because we're going to answer these questions. I know how to get involved in working international tournaments. And so the majority of you said you don't know how. So that's a good thing for us because that is one of the things we're going to talk about. And we're going to, between Jake and Dina, we're going to talk about their experiences, but we're also going to talk about, you know, on a global scale or on a USA hockey scale, what do you need to do to get into an IIHF event? So as we talk about those things, and I'm just going to bring up a slide here for us to explore, you know, let's talk about it. First off, from an IIHF officiating standpoint, you know, what is the IIHF? What does the IIHF stand for? Well, the IIHF stands for the International Ice Hockey Federation. And much like USA Hockey is the governing body for ice hockey in the United States, the IIHF is the governing body globally of all international competitions. So if you were to look at a flow chart, USA Hockey is a member of the IIHF, along with Hockey Canada, the Czech Republic Ice Hockey Federation, the Swedish Ice Hockey Federation, German Federation, all of those things. So that's what the IIHF is. And when you talk about IIHF officiating, what we're talking about is in most tournaments, the officiating pool comes from various countries around the world. So USA Hockey nominates, or in specific terms, USA Hockey licenses a number of officials every season and then nominates them to work various competitions around the world. And the IIHF, though you mentioned on your poll question that you've watched the World Juniors or you've watched the World Championships, the IIHF runs over 30 competitions around the world every year. And for example, at the World Juniors that just concluded, the 10 top hockey playing countries in the world participated. But below that, there are a whole host of countries that compete at lower divisions. And so there is Division 1A, which might have Denmark and Poland and Ukraine and Kazakhstan and countries like that. And then you keep going down all the way down to countries like Israel and Mexico and New Zealand. And they do the same thing on the women's side. And so when USA Hockey nominates its officials, those officials, only the top percent, which makes our two guests today really special because they were at competitions such as the Olympics and the World Championships. But when you first begin with the IIHF, you might go to lower level tournaments. For example, Jake, when you first started, you've worked 5 different competitions. Where did you first go when you first began in the IIHF?
So my first term was actually in New Zealand. So when I saw that assignment, I was just astonished because I never would have thought I'd be going to New Zealand to referee ice hockey, and it was beyond my imagination, but it was a pleasure and a lot of fun. So
and what countries are playing ice hockey at that division level of a tournament? What teams were playing?
China was there, Turkey was there, South Africa, and what else? I think there was Mexico too. So yeah, pretty much assortment of teams from all over the world.
And I'm going to guess that the majority of our audience today didn't know that Turkey that there was such a thing as the Turkish Ice Hockey Federation and that they were playing. And I can speak for another gentleman, Charlie O'Connor, who is a licensed official. His first tournament was in Turkey. When you first started, what's kind of the most exotic place that you might have been to in your IIHF career?
My first tournament was in Ravensburg, Germany, a little town in the southwestern portion of Germany. It was a Division 1A women's tournament. It was a lot of fun.
And so at the Division 1A, what sort of countries were participating?
If I recall correctly, back in 2011, it was Germany was there, Russia, I believe, was there. Trying to think of who else. It was so long ago now. Russia, Germany, I don't know, a whole host of countries that aren't necessarily Turkey on the women's side. Turkey doesn't have a team on the women's side, but Russia at that point was kind of on the bubble. If you can think about sort of the women's perspective over in Russia and a few of the different countries, they did have a team participate that year, but sometimes it's questioned whether or not they're going to be funding the women's side of things. So,
yeah, and that's something we should mention, that hockey, as we continue to grow the game, and if we go back 20 years ago, there were significantly fewer women's teams participating, and then when you look at where we are now, the women's game is growing significantly. And so those divisions, there are more divisions, more teams on the men's side, but the women's hockey is catching up for sure. And that's an important thing. So Jake might have gone to New Zealand. I'm not so sure they're playing women's hockey in New Zealand yet.
They're not playing. No.
Yeah.
But that's been, we get into talking about the Olympics and whatnot later on, and that's been an awesome part of it, especially the Olympics with the United Korea team and all the politics and everything that sort of surrounded that event were quite interesting.
No, for sure. And so let's back up a little bit here. So, okay, Jake's been to New Zealand to start off, and Dina went to Germany. Dina, how did you get involved in the IIHF? Like, what steps did you go through? Because a lot of our audience, they don't know how to become licensed through USA Hockey. So I'm going to ask you both the same question, which is, what was your first step in that journey and we're going to work backwards for the audience here, but what was your first step in that journey as you became licensed through USA Hockey?
Right. So I think on the women's side, there's a whole host of different ways that women work their way, generally speaking, into officiating. For instance, one of the ladies, the officials that I worked with from the US who went over to the Olympics with me, I actually worked with. Our first time meeting her was in regional camp back in 2009. And she actually was a figure skater and started just officiating, versus my background. I started playing hockey when I was 4, played all the way through college. And then when I moved back to Buffalo to go to law school, I decided, I should probably get some sort of side hustle, making money in law school. And that's how I got into officiating. I actually didn't really, I was highly penalized and didn't really like officials very much. Bob Ritchie, if anyone's from the New Jersey area, was my arch nemesis in college. But so I started officiating, and then was invited to regional camp the first summer that I worked after my first year of officiating, which I think caught the eye of a few USA Hockey supervisors, including Matt Lee. And then the next summer I was invited we didn't have a national camp at that time. We had regional, and then there weren't enough female officials to support the national camp. So we jumped right to the elite camp the next summer, a few of us from the regional camp. From there, the next year is when I was certified, once I attended elite camp.
So kind of your last step along the process was the elite camp or the elite experience on the women's side, and then you began, right?
I began my international. Yes, that's when I became licensed and had my first tournament.
Okay, fantastic. And Jake, how about you? Same question.
Yeah, so a similar path to Dina. So I was just doing grassroots officiating, like youth hockey back home in Wyandotte. And yeah, so I pretty much was able to go to regional camp. That was like my first thing. Now it's called Futures Camp, but back when me and Dina were working that stuff, it was regional camp. So I attended regional camp, and I think some people saw me, and my following year I got to work in the officials development program. So I got to work for you for a year, and working in the North American Hockey League and college club and pretty much all that. It was like the NA3, a lot of leagues in your program. So I worked that for a year, and I was actually very fortunate that following summer. Someone was supposed to be attending the lead experience and couldn't make it. And I remember your phone call. So it was summertime, and you called asking if I wanted to attend this. And at the time, I had no idea what it was. I was like, you were telling me it's a potential opportunity for international officiating. I was like, absolutely, that sounds great. Count me in. And I think it was in Lake Placid. And it was a great experience because I got to learn from a lot of NHL officials like yourself, Brian Murphy, Denny LaRue, Chris Rooney. There were a lot of guys. It was a great experience. And after that camp, same thing with Dina. I was certified that next year and had my first tournament. So.
You know what? I forgot all about that phone call, but that's right. That is a true story. And so, kind of the message for those of you out there watching is, and I say this in full disclosure, I am involved on the men's side in the elite experience, and the elite experience is USA Hockey on both the men's and women's side. The elite camp or the elite experience is our gateway to international officiating. It's an opportunity to work multiple countries. The U.S. On the men's side, the U.S. usually has they run a camp. It's part of their selection process for the World Juniors. They'll have 4 or 5 various federations. They'll bring potential players over, and they'll run a round robin tournament. On the women's side, it might be a series with the U.S. and Canada. It might be something else like that. But that's the gateway through it. And the truth of the matter is, and like I said, I say this all the time, an IIHF license is the most valuable thing that USA Hockey can give to one of its officials. USA Hockey can't decide to have Dina Allen working Hockey East in women's college hockey, or the ECAC women's college hockey, or can't decide to have Jake Davis working in the American Hockey League. We don't control those decisions, but we do control who we license and then nominate to represent us overseas or even on our own soil as one of the select American officials to go representing USA Hockey. And the pathway to that are all the things that you guys both mentioned. And for our audience out there, it's participating in futures camps. Now, regional camps back then. It's going to high performance camps. It's going to you don't have to necessarily, if you're a male, work for me in the officiating development program, but it's working the best level hockey you can, because every year we nominate and license the top officials in the country. So the reality is, it's not an easy thing to get, and the people that get licensed are truly the best we have, not only on the ice but off the ice as well. And the process, though, is get to that elite experience, go through those camps, work as much hockey as you possibly can. And then from there, you get those opportunities to go to New Zealand or go to Germany. And then from there, what happens? Talk to us a little bit about your path, Jake. What all the various tournaments, explain that progression. And then Dina, I'll come to you for kind of the same thing. So now you've got that license. You decided to answer my phone call and go to Lake Placid for a week. And then what happened?
Yeah, so that following was fall. Pretty much Matt Leaf sends out all the assignments for the U.S. men's side and women's side. And yeah, so you work a tournament. My first one was in New Zealand, and you have a supervisor there, similar like how you would have a supervisor in games back home. And it's a very thorough supervision, and you get supervised every game, which that goes in the IIHF record. So then they pretty much have a database with pretty much all the officials and their supervisions. And I think they base that off tournament to tournament, and I just think it rolls over. So after New Zealand, my next tournament was in North Dakota for the U18 A pool tournament, and that was really cool. Then after that, my next year, I worked the World Junior Championship, and that was in Toronto and Montreal. And then the year after that, I got to work the Men's World Championship in Copenhagen, Denmark. And then the year prior to this one, I got to go to was Estonia, so Tallinn, Estonia, for I believe it was the men's Division 1A tournament. So those are all the tournaments I got to work, and I was lucky enough to work each year. And yeah, just take my supervisions from my supervisors and build off that each year. And that's sort of how my careers went in IIHF officiating.
And in general, and you should also, were you supposed to go any place last year in 2020 before the world kind of went upside down?
Yes, I was supposed to work the Men's World Championship again in Switzerland. That'd been really fun to go, but unfortunately coronavirus put a damper on that, but it is what it is.
And Dina, talk to us. So your progression, Jake, was very, kind of start in New Zealand, go to the U18s, work the World Juniors. Now you're at the World Championships. And there's only one kind of rung left on the ladder, right? And I'm going to assume that might be something you want to get to in the next handful of years.
Yep, absolutely, that is my goal.
Yeah. So and for those of you, we're talking about Beijing in 2022 at the Winter Olympics, right? So
absolutely,
it's not to go back to New Zealand.
I would love to go back to New Zealand. I wouldn't take that off the list.
No, perfect. So Dina, talk to us about your progression and what did you do as you worked your way towards South Korea in the Winter Olympics in 2016?
Yeah, so similar type of progression as Jake. I think the other thing to mention too is every tournament I went to, we had to do physical fitness testing at the tournament, where they're timing you on your skating and all different drills, in addition to evaluations on the ice and the supervision on the ice. So I started out women's Division 1A in Germany, April 2011. And then January of 12, I did the U18 tournament, the women's U18 in the Czech Republic. From there, I actually, similar to Jake's call, somebody, a U.S. official had to back out of the Women's World Championships in April of 2012. And I answered the phone from Matt Leaf actually while I was in the Czech Republic, and was able to work 2 tournaments that year, which typically you only get 1 tournament, international tournament a year. So I had 2 that year. So I had the Women's World Championships in Vermont. February of 2013, so the following year, I worked the final Olympic qualifier in Slovakia. In August of 13, that same year, the women's side had sort of for the first time ever on the women's side, an Olympic tryout type camp for the referees in Lake Placid, where we had to do a ton of physical fitness testing. That year, they took 1 US referee to the Olympics, and I was the last one cut. So I didn't get to go that year. So the following year, since my husband was getting super old, we decided to have a child. So I took that year off. And so then the following year, so I had our first son in January of 2015. So the fall of 2016, when all the assignments were coming out, like Jake had mentioned, I didn't get one. I was super bummed about it. But again, that year I picked up the phone when somebody else from a different country didn't want to ref. And I was able to work the Division 2A tournament in Slovenia. I had about a month's notice that I was going to Slovenia. I got into the best shape of my life in that month. Not really, but I worked really hard. I actually, when we had to do all of the on ice testing, I beat all of my scores and all of my times from the pre-Olympic testing. So I was super, super happy about that. Again, on the women's side, it's a little bit different than the men's, you know, physical fitness wise, when you have to have kids, it throws a little damper into things. And then from there, after proving myself again in Slovenia, February of 2017, I got a final Olympic qualifier in Switzerland. And then was able to also that year work April of 2017 Women's Worlds in Michigan, which was super fun. And then August of 17, so that same year, we had the Olympic physical fitness testing in Magglingen, Switzerland, which is a little bit more similar to what the men's side does. So they sort of switched it from the previous Olympics to be a little bit more comparable to the men's side this past Olympics, which was pretty cool. And then I worked the Olympics in Pyeongchang. Oh, yep. There we are having super fun. We were right, our hotel, it was beautiful. Our hotel, we were at this awesome resort in South Korea. Just outside the resort, they had the Olympic rings there. We were right on the water, and it was super fun. So that's my husband there in the blue ring, and my dad came over to see everything and to watch partway through the Olympics. They came over because we were actually over there for 18 days. I was over there, so they came over for the last handful of days. So, oh, Scott, you're still muted.
I'm going to keep talking, and I'm just kind of talking away. So, as some of you might have noted in the chat boxes, I've been in a bubble for the last 6 weeks, and so bear with me while I figure out how to operate this machinery again. But you know, Dina, you mentioned something that's really important, and you talked about physical fitness testing and how at your tournaments and your championships you did all of those things. And Jake, I can tell you or I don't need to tell you. You can tell us. It's very similar on the men's side in terms of the expectations. When you go to these events, you know, these are the best officials from every federation that's represented, right? You're only going with 1 or 2 or 3 fellow Americans, correct? And you know, fitness is a big deal on both the men's and women's side, right, Jake?
Yes, absolutely. So some of what Dina said, so my first 3 championships, I did do physical fitness testing, and it's part of your evaluation. So you got to make sure that you are in shape going there. And yeah, it is very important. So we would do like sprints forward, sprints backwards. We would do like agility drills, and we would do like sort of like a figure 8 drills. So they are pretty strenuous tests. So you definitely have to make sure you are in shape going to these tournaments.
And you know, you mentioned, you know, your evaluations when you're at these, and they go into your database and they're part of your historical record. Dina, were those fitness tests that so you've been to 2 pre-Olympic fitness camps or pre-Olympic evaluation camps in the summertime.
Yes.
Those are all part of your record as well, right? And so they're
Absolutely.
looking at those things.
Absolutely. They're looking at everything. They're looking at, just like you said, Scott, they're looking at your physical fitness testing, your performance on the ice, how you handle yourself off the ice, your ability to be a team player. Because I think although we're all competing with one another when we're at the tournaments, we are there to be the best team at the tournament, and we are there to support one another, even though we are competing. And I think it's a healthy competition. And again, you know, you want to work the best game at the end of the day, but you know, you got to work for it.
No, for sure. And no, you're absolutely right. And you know, like Jake, you talked a little bit about being evaluated and things like that, but what can an official expect when they go to one of these, get selected to go to a championship? What's it like to be an official at one of these events? And just so I note before I let you answer here, we already have a number of questions in the Q&A button at the bottom. And some of them relate around what just happened at the World Juniors, and we'll touch on those because that was a very unique situation. But in the olden days, before we had a global pandemic, what was it like to go to one of those tournaments? What would an official expect, you know, to go, whether it's in New Zealand or at a World Juniors?
I mean, the first and foremost thing I think is just getting immersed in the culture of the country, because we're used to officiating in the U.S. and going over there, you are sort of integrating yourself with various styles of officiating, and you have to sort of, it's a challenge. It's a healthy challenge, but it's a challenge working with, because I'm a linesman, working with someone that has maybe a different style or does things a little differently than we're used to in the U.S. So you have to definitely be an open book and being able to compromise and communicate. Communication is huge, because especially in those tournaments, like when I was at New Zealand, my roommate was from South Korea, didn't speak very well, like English very well. And I worked with him quite a bit, and just being able to, whether it be hand gestures or just talking, like when we're not on the ice in the locker room or around at breakfast or lunch or dinner, that is your time to be talking. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges for me, is that communication. But it's different, but it's a good different. And I think that's one of the biggest things. But just overall, like Dina said, teamwork. I think that's huge when you go to these things. You always want to make sure you are part of the team. And what's great is when you are hanging out with these guys and these ladies, you make good friendships. Like I still am friends with the people I went to New Zealand 5 years ago. We still talk, and that's the cool part. Is refereeing is not just in the United States; it's everywhere, and we're a large community. And I think that's one of my favorite parts of the international stage. So.
No, for sure. And Dina, I want to ask you the same question. What can officials expect? But also, Jake mentioned maybe doing things a little differently than we might be used to in North America or in the US. That's true, right? The IIHF has some different procedures, and we're expected to adapt to them. They're not changing to us, right?
Yeah. I think, obviously you're working with the international, the IIHF rulebook, you're working a little bit different procedurally. But at the same time, similar to what Jake was saying, I think some of the other countries might do things a little bit differently than we do. And sometimes it's easier to work with them because they do things more the IIHF way. But at other times, I know a few of the officials that I had worked with, they did a lot of the 1 and 2. And their sort of mentality towards going into the 4-man was a little bit different than mine, as I had been working with the 4-man system in college hockey for several years before they had started to pick it up. So working and communicating with them on those things. There was a question about, what's the main language? It is English. So the bonus that we have is we already know the English language, which makes things easier, but just being cognizant of that fact that it's the second language for everybody else you're working with is super important. But they are being evaluated on their English as well, as my understanding.
No, and I can confirm, and so I am an officiating coach for the IIHF, and so I'm one of those people at some of these championships that are evaluating officials. And yes, to answer the question, English is the official language of the IIHF, and the expectation is, we don't expect everyone to speak English as well as Jake and Dina, but at the same token, you do need to be able to communicate to a certain extent in English, and we do evaluate officials on that. And there are officials from around the world that have learned English specifically with the goal of being able to officiate in the IIHF. And Jake, have you, what's it like maybe to work, or what are some of the challenges when you're working with an official that maybe doesn't speak English very well at all, or we might evaluate and say this official needs to improve on his or her English. What are some of those challenges?
Yeah, so usually before the game, like we have like a pregame talk, and we're talking about what we do on the ice, and if they're not speaking English that well, or there is a communication barrier, like oftentimes we'll just have a clipboard with a lot of the officials have that, and we just look, okay, this is where I'm going to be standing, this is where we have to go, and if this happens, this is where I'm going to go. So it's not only just talking, it is that nonverbal communication and just having those things handy just in case you might need them if that situation arises. So I think that's something that's helped me out for sure, is just using diagrams and things like that, because some people don't speak English, like you said, as well as some of us do. So
And Dina, do you have any examples of where maybe it became more challenging because your partner or your fellow officials didn't speak very well? And how did you work yourself out of that?
Yeah, I think, there's times when there's, especially when you're reffing and trying to make a close call, or you're trying to communicate about a call with another official, especially when you're on the ice. I mean, Jake's talking too about diagrams before the game, and obviously we do everything in our power to communicate before the game to be prepared on the ice, but sometimes things come up, and being able to communicate without using too much, because obviously we always talk about, let's not like make big facial signals and hand gestures while we're trying to figure things out, because we don't want the whole world to know what we're talking about. But sometimes when you're in that situation, they don't speak English as well, you're sort of trying to just communicate as best you can with them.
And I think, that's one of those things. Jake talked about being a team, or maybe it was you, Dina, and, one of the first things you do, and I'm going to guess at every event that you were at, in some way, shape, or form, there was an attempt made by the management group there, the officiating coaches, to build a little bit of a team atmosphere and a team environment. And that's one of the biggest reasons, right? It's important that you integrate, in that the Americans don't just sit with the Americans, and the Eastern Europeans don't just sit with the Eastern Europeans and whatnot, because at some point you're going to get thrown together, right? The majority of your games for both of you probably weren't working with your fellow American officials, were you?
Yes, for sure. So like you said, that's a good point, Scott, because usually we get to the tournament like 2 or 3 days before even play starts. So that's a great time for that to happen, where we get to just talk and mingle and spend time with one another to break those barriers, like you said. I think that's the big thing I wanted to say in regards to that. So
and Dina, did when in your various tournaments, do you work with the same officials every game, or is it mixed up all the time? That was one of our questions we just got. So
yeah, it's mixed up a lot. I think in some tournaments, some of the higher level tournaments, I have found patterns in who you're paired with. So sometimes you'll work with, you'll have a game early on in the tournament with maybe the same people that they're sort of anticipating might maybe work the bronze medal game together or the gold medal game together. I think the supervising staff overseeing it wants to get some people working together, see how they work together, if they can work well together, to see later on what it might look like. But for the most part, you're working with different people all the time.
Yeah, and Jake, same thing for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, same thing. So I tend to work with pretty much the same, not the same people, but there have been trends. But yes, it's usually a lot of like Eastern Europeans or things like that. It's not just people from America. They want to integrate pretty much every country for you to work.
And have either one of you ever gone to one of these events and worked a game that's involved the U.S.?
Nope,
never have.
That's the challenge on the women's side, is you want to work the best game possible, but if US is always in that gold medal game,
yes,
you might never get it there.
No, and you know what, and that's one of the questions we had, and one of the big things, and I will tell you, as part of the officiating coach group for the IIHF, we all fully believe in trust in the integrity of every official that comes to one of these tournaments, whether they're from Russia, Switzerland, Slovenia, Turkey, or the US. But at the same token, it is very rare, if ever, outside of last week, where officials are going to work games with their home country. And it's no different than we experience at home in terms of wanting to avoid any sort of perceived bias. And so, Dina, you talked about, especially on the women's side, we're very fortunate that our women's program has been successful as it is, but that's, with the exception of maybe one Olympics, or the very rare odd world championships, that kind of takes the ability to work a gold medal game off of the plate for any of our officials, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And so when you go to this, do you judge your performance based on that final game, or do you have to look at other things because there are so many other factors involved?
The latter for sure. I think there's a ton of factors going into, deciding who's going to work what game and what's going on in the tournament. And if you saw that coach early on and there was an issue with that coach early on in the tournament, you might not see them again. There's so many factors that go into it, but so you can't judge it just based solely on the last game that you get for the tournament.
And Jake, how about yourself? Anything you'd want to add on that?
Yeah, the big thing is you just can't take it personal. You can't be discouraged just because you didn't work a gold medal or a bronze medal. You just express your thankfulness to be able to work that tournament, and maybe you'll get another opportunity in the future. But it's not solely based on your performance. There are other things involved, and that's the thing. You just have to, just take it how it is and persevere, and hopefully you'll get more opportunities in the future. I think that's how I always think of it. So.
No, for sure. And so, we've talked about evaluations. Each one of you, when you work, every game you work is evaluated by an officiating coach. You have an opportunity at the end to have almost an exit meeting, right? Where you sit down with the management team and they talk to you about those things, and they're able to kind of explain or frame your performance and such to give you a good understanding of where you fit in. Because once again, for our audience here, you're able to see who's working various games at the end of the tournament. And there's so many different factors that have gone in that if your favorite American official, whether a male or female, isn't working one of those medal games, it doesn't automatically mean they had a bad tournament. And I think that's an important thing. Jake, what's the worst thing about going to an international event?
The worst thing, that's hard. There's so many good things. Probably the hardest thing would probably be just spending time away from your family, and if you have a full-time job, I think that's the toughest part, because as Dina mentioned, you're gone for, especially in the World Championships and the Olympics, you're gone for 3 weeks potentially, and that's a long time. So it is a big time commitment. It's worth it, but it can be difficult if you do have a full-time job or you have very strong family commitments. I think that's probably the biggest disadvantage, but I mean, the positives far outweigh the negatives.
Yeah. And Dina, for you, what's the most challenging aspect of being involved, or what's something that you're like, man, I didn't expect this?
Yeah, I think the same things that Jake said. I think a lot of vacation time from work was spent, doing tournaments, which obviously is awesome and super fun. But it's time away from work, juggling it when you get back, family being away. The other thing that just for some of the international ones sometimes challenging is like a random thing is like the kind of food you eat and deviating from your usual rituals. So try not to get into those rituals because it might not look the same way when you go away, because they might not have the same equipment or the same food or the same, anything that you're used to. So I think that's always a challenge on the international side as opposed to being here in the US or Canada.
And so going into it with a little bit of a flexible mindset is really important based on food and customs and whatnot, right?
Got to be agile in all of it.
No, for sure. But I'm going to guess for both of you, looking back, you wouldn't trade any of that for the experiences you've had, correct?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I can eat some more schnitzel if I need to.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I can eat some more schnitzel if I need to.
That's right. You get a little bit of that when you're in Germany, that's for sure. What, if I said to you, Jake, give me your best memory or the best thing you've taken away from your various events, what would it be?
My favorite memory, I still remember it vividly, and it was for my World Junior Championship. The hype around that tournament being in Toronto at the Air Canada Center. I had Canada's opening game against Russia. And as I'm sure all you know, that's a huge rivalry game, and there's probably 16,000 people packed in the stands for that game. And I got out there and I was just so pumped. I couldn't feel my legs for like 5 minutes on the ice. I was so excited, and that was definitely probably the most vivid memory I've had in any tournament. Like just having that atmosphere and multiple countries playing, and it was excellent. So.
And Dina, certainly you've been to the top of the mountain. You had a good experience, but in in a long time from now, when you're telling your grandchildren about your IIHF career, and we're going to emphasize long time from now, what are you gonna, what's your enduring memory from your events?
I think the friendships that I formed, I think will be there for a long time. And but pointing to one memory, one vivid, I think dropping that puck for that first unified Korea-Switzerland game at the Olympics. It was the first day of the tournament, the evening game. It was packed. You had all the dignitaries there from South Korea. It was a huge moment. And it was a lot of fun.
So for
South Korean cheerleaders there and everything, it was super fun.
So for the people that might not necessarily exactly what you're talking about, when you talk about the unified team and things, what do you mean? Give a little context for us, please.
So in the weeks leading up to the Olympics in Pyeongchang, North Korea and South Korea decided to join teams. It was more like North Korea added some players to the South Korean team. And they played together on the same team throughout the Olympics. And North Korea sent their cheerleaders. So I accidentally said South Korea before, but they sent their North Korean cheerleaders, and just the history behind all of it. It was really interesting to sort of observe. I think the social and cultural aspects of being over there was really interesting. So beyond the hockey and all of that, and the meaning of it all. It was a lot of fun. And being able to see all the different events, all the other sports, because when you're over there 18 days, I worked 4 games in 18 days with standby for 2 games. And when you get to that level, at least our supervisors said, hey, you guys are professional. You know what you need to do to be ready for a game. You've worked your butt off to get here. So just be ready for the games when you get here. So you had a lot of downtime, which was awesome.
Yeah. And Dina, if you were going to give any advice to a young female official that says, I want to be like her, I want to go to the Olympics in 2026 or whatnot, what's the best advice you could give to an official that wants to get involved internationally? I
think one of the biggest things is control all of those things you can control. You can control your rule knowledge, you control your fitness level, you can control your performance on the ice. You can control your reaction in the locker room to your supervision at the end of the day. Control all those things. And there are certain things, like we talked about earlier, you might not get the best game at the end of the day, but control those things you can and have a good attitude the whole way through. Listen to your supervisors and learn from every single game that you work.
And Jake, same question for you.
Yes, similar to Dina, I was going to say, yeah, definitely try to control the things you can control. And yeah, be an open book, always be able to accept criticism and be open-minded, because that's going to be what makes you better. And to add to that, skate every game, hustle hard, like work hard, because you never know who's in the building watching. You never know what opportunity is going to come your way. So just skate every game like it's your last, and who knows what will happen, because I've been given opportunities that I never thought I would have been able to do. And if you work hard, opportunities will come. And yeah, who knows, maybe you'll be working an international tournament one day.
And how important is it for each of you to represent, the flag or represent USA Hockey? That's probably a pretty special feeling as well, right, Dina?
Absolutely. On the women's side, especially, I mean, we have the top officials in the world. So for me, it was a huge honor to have been able to make it, because I'm not only competing against the other countries, but I'm competing against all the ladies here in the US. And there's a strong group coming up, and it's exciting to watch them. And it's certainly an honor to be able to represent USA Hockey.
Anything you want to add to that, Jake?
Yeah, same thing. So just Dina summed it up well, but yeah, just being there and being able to represent USA Hockey at one of the highest levels is just it makes me really proud. And yeah, just to hear the anthem playing or something like that, like I don't know, it's exciting. I get excited. So
no, for sure. And if I'm going to add anything, because somebody that's involved on the selection side, for those officials that want to be a part of this, like I said before, an International Ice Hockey Federation license is the most valuable thing we have. And we have not selected or not licensed both men and women that we feel are going to not represent USA Hockey in the best possible manner. And that's the reality, because when you go over there, you're going to be with a group of 10, 15, 20, 25 officials from around the world. And we want to make sure we're sending the best representation of what our officiating program is all about. So that's, I know you guys never needed to get that speech and you guys never had to worry about that, but that's an important thing too for our officials that want to think about being involved internationally. And so I think, you guys gave some great advice, and you never know, working all the time is so important. And it's funny, when we do these Zoom casts, whether we're talking about positioning or we're talking about communication or we're talking about any of the different topics we've talked about, all of those things get folded into getting to reach the levels you guys have reached, right? And so once again, there's no real secret sauce. We have had a number of questions, and I'm going to touch on a few of them here, and then we'll throw a few to you guys. A number of the questions have revolved around the World Juniors this past year, or this past December and January. And so here's a photo of the officiating staff from Edmonton that was taken a couple of weeks ago. And we're all wearing our masks, and we'll give a USA Hockey pin to the first person that can figure out where I am. But a lot of the questions, and I'm going to be very brief here, but a lot of the questions were about the fact that this staff was entirely Canadian. And just so we can explain for everyone out there, the reason what we had to go through was I was gone, and every official in this picture was gone 32 days from home. They had to isolate with beginning for 6 days prior to getting to Edmonton, and pass three negative COVID tests. And then after that, we flew to Edmonton, and we spent 5 days locked in our hotel room where we could not leave the room while wearing monitoring bracelets, and had to pass or test negative every day for that. And so they created a very hard bubble. And it was determined through not only Hockey Canada and the IIHF, but the Alberta health authorities, that the only way they could handle this tournament or run this tournament was by using Canadian-only officials, because of bringing people in from outside the country. And as a matter of fact, there were 5 officiating coaches, and myself and another gentleman from Denmark were the only 2 non-Canadians involved in that group. And so how did we feel about it? I guess I would ask Jake and Dina, how did you feel about knowing the fact that it was only Canadian officials working that tournament? Jake, it's a tournament maybe you had the opportunity to go to. How do you feel about it, or what did you think?
I mean, I understand the process and why they did it, like with the whole bubble, and it is financial, right? So we get paid an allowance each day. So having us to quarantine for that many days before the tournament, it's a big expense for the IIHF. So I can understand where they're coming from. Obviously, I mean, you want to potentially be considered for the tournament, but yeah, these are weird times, and yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm not as upset that there were no Americans represented, but yeah, it is what it is.
I feel like it's just kind of disappointing because it's a lost opportunity, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And that is the biggest challenge. And I just talked about how USA Hockey only licenses a certain number of officials. Well, Hockey Canada had to make special arrangements to license all of those officials, because the reality is only a handful of those officials were actually licensed. And I'll ask you guys, we had a question about, once you're licensed, are you licensed forever, or do you have to go through that process again? Dina, what's the process on the women's side?
Every year you hope that you performed well the previous year. You hope that you did well in your tournament so that you're going to be essentially asked back again via the licensing. Like Jake said, a letter comes out, late summer, early fall, indicating that, you've been licensed. You have to fill out some forms or whatever, respond back, and then, and you get your crest, and then you hope to find out that you get selected for a tournament. So it's not guaranteed. Trust me, if somebody acts inappropriate at a tournament, they're not going to be licensed that next year. They're just going to pull it away. So it's a privilege to be able to be licensed, and you work your butt off and work hard and hope to get it the next year.
For sure. So here, Jake, I'll throw you this one that just came in. And Dina, then I'll follow up with you. Internationally, but even on the national level within USA Hockey, what was your decision to be a referee or a linesman? Did the IIHF determine that, or how did you determine to be a referee or a linesman? And in your case, you're a linesman. How did that decision get made for you?
Really, until regional camp or futures camp now, that was pretty much what I did both. And after regional camp, the instructors said they see good potential in me to be a linesman. And I had the size, and it's something I enjoy doing. I like to ref and line, but it's just something that I saw as a path potentially for me to advance, and I ran with it. So then from there, throughout all the leagues in the officials development program for you, and in the American League and the ECHL, I am a linesman, and I have a linesman certification for licensing for IIHF, because there is a referee license and a linesman license. So my license is for a linesman, and it's just something that I chose at an early time and just ran with. So
there's also, haven't mentioned, there's also different levels of licensing. There's A and B, and depending upon which level you get, you have the ability to work certain tournaments. So you have to be an A in order to work the top level tournaments.
No, for sure. And so Dina, how about yourself? What drove you to choosing to become a referee?
Same type of process as Jake. When I was at regional camp, now futures camp, I was sort of funneled down the referee side of things. And I think that was solidified at elite camp, that I was more a referee than a linesman. I'm not a very good linesman. It's apparent when I do it. So I think I was just sort of funneled that route, and suggested that I go that route. It's when I was at, regional camp, that's when you work you work towards that last day and you want to be on that game. I was a referee that game. And I just sort of worked in that direction.
That's awesome. As we get here towards the top of the hour, I'm curious, and we wrap up, if there, Dina, if there are any kind of parting comments or thoughts when we talk about IIHF officiating or your experiences. Is there anything, you'd like to leave us with in terms of experience, thoughts, or whatnot?
Yeah, I think it's been an awesome experience for me. I never would have thought going into officiating. I didn't even know there was an option to officiate internationally, how to get into it. I knew nothing, just like what's 70-some% of the people, the pollers watching. So I think, keep an open mind with it, work hard. If you have other local people who've gone through the process, don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions, and to get feedback, and to get as much supervision as you can to keep pushing towards the top levels.
Fantastic. Jake, how about yourself?
Yeah, just add to what Dina had to say. Like when I first started officiating, never would have thought international officiating was even on the plate. Like we all think, okay, I'd like to work college hockey, I'd like to work like professional hockey, but you really don't think of international. And I'm so happy that I got involved with it, because it's been the highlight of my career. It's a pleasure to do that every year, and it's a passion of mine. And if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk more about it and just give more advice. But it's been the highlight of my career. I'm so happy that I was able to do it, and hopefully continue to do it. So